Oh my gosh. So we have another case of abuse, guys. Abuse. A woman has been arrested in Waterbury, Connecticut, after allegedly kidnapping her stepson and holding him captive for over 20 years. 20 years. How did he get free? On February 17th, crews responded to a fire at a home on Blake Street in Waterbury. Two people, 56-year-old Kimberly Sullivan and a 32-year-old man, was inside the home at the time. Now, she got out safely, and firefighters helped the man out. While being evaluated for smoke inhalation, the victim, the man, told first responders that he intentionally set the fire in his upstairs room by using a lighter, hand sanitizer. I'm sorry, guys. That just threw me. Like, he used a lighter, hand sanitizer, and paper because he wanted his freedom. He wanted to get out. He said that she had held him captive since he was 11 years old. 11 years old. So for 2 decades, this guy has been living in a one-room home. While he's there, he's enduring abuse, starvation, severe neglect, and inhumane treatment. He was found severely, and like he was only like 68 pounds when they found him. So he has not received any medical or dental care the whole time that he was being in captivity, and he was given very minimum amounts of food and water. So I'm going to share with you what I've found so far on this case.
As you all know, on February 17th, around 8:40 p.m., Waterbury police responded to 2 Blake Street on a report of a fire. Officers and fire investigators immediately realized there were some grave concerns about some of the conditions in the house. There were one being Kimberly Sullivan, the stepmother of the. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. As you all know, on February 17th, around 8:40 p.m., Waterbury police responded to 2 Blake Street on a report of a fire. Officers and fire investigators immediately realized there were some grave concerns about some of the conditions in the house. There were 2 occupants of the house, one being Kimberly Sullivan, the stepmother of the male victim. Officers and fire investigators
And I'm sorry, guys, just bear with me. But what I understand, his father was the one that had custody of him. And he died like last year, early part of last year. But when he was alive, he was like wheelchair bound. And supposedly, according to the stepmother, this was all his doing by his direction. Okay, that this treatment to this child was done all by his direction. Okay, he's been deceased for a year. Like, there's no excuse. If that's the excuse you want to use, okay, but there's no excuse now. There's no reason why he should not. He should still have been in captivity after his father deceased. She was just as guilty as his father, if his father was even involved, like he said she was. Like she could have. I don't know. It's just the whole situation is just crazy. It's totally crazy. My sound don't want to work. I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second. Let me try.
Just quickly realized that there was. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. As you all know, on February 17th, around 8:40 p.m., Waterbury Police responded to 2 Blake Street on a report of a fire. Officers and fire investigators immediately realized there were some grave concerns about some of the conditions in the house. There were 2 occupants of the house, one being Kimberly Sullivan, the stepmother of the male victim. Officers and fire investigators quickly realized that there was a room in the house that appeared to have locks on it from the exterior portion of the house. They began to speak to the male victim, who disclosed that he was being held captive in the house for an extended period of time, approximately 20 years. The investigation began from that point. We worked closely with the State's Attorney's Office, Maureen Platt, as well as Assistant State's Attorney Don Thurkelson, because frankly, what was being reported was unfathomable to us at that point in time. Through those investigative meetings and through search warrants, we were able to seize physical evidence and conduct interviews and dig up some more information that corroborated the victim's story. This investigation, as the mayor points out, continues, is very open and very active. We were able to obtain arrest warrants for Kimberly Sullivan. She was arrested yesterday. She was arraigned in Waterbury Superior Court. She's currently being held on a $300,000 bond. At this point, I'll open the floor up for any questions.
The biological father, we've learned that he recently left the home, and her lawyer is saying that we need to look deeper into his part in all of this. When it comes to the investigation, is he being held accountable at all?
The biological father is deceased and died in January of 2024. Prior to his death, he was wheelchair bound from some medical conditions.
Okay. Also, it was reported to the school system that this boy at the time, now 32-year-old man, he was starving, he was asking other kids for lunch. I mean, is this a failure on the school system that this matter was not taken more seriously?
So we're doing some background investigation. There are 2 incidents that we had within our computer system of dealing with that address and with the family back in 2005. One was a request from DCF to do a welfare check at the location because children that the victim was familiar with hadn't seen him and they were concerned about him. Officers went to the house. The house was clean. It was lived in. They spoke to the victim at that point in time, and there were no cause for any alarm or any conditions that existed that would have led officers to believe anything other than a normal childhood and a normal family existence was occurring, but that was reported back to DCF, and that was the last that we were involved in that particular investigation. We were called back to the house in the latter part of April by the family who wanted to file a harassment complaint against members of the school district, saying that they were continuously reporting them to DCF and felt that they were trying to get the family in trouble and have the family investigated. We have no further information about where that went, other than there was no proof provided by the family that there was any type of harassment that was occurring. As far as the school district's concerned, we are looking at those records now. We're working with DCF to look at records that they may have from previous investigations, and that's part of the ongoing investigation.
But Chief, people were filing complaints, even if it was with DCF continuously, as the family, I guess, alleged. Was there more contact from DCF, and do you know anything about how that would run?
So the only contact we had was back in April of 2005 when we were notified to conduct that welfare check. And again, we're looking for those records now to determine where that investigation may have gone, but there was no further reported information to the Waterbury Police Department.
So when you had an officer go out there that first time, you're saying everything looked normal, it looked like a normal childhood, but the school district, the principal told us that the child looked really small, malnourished, was drinking from a urinal at school, was taking kids' food. So, I mean, with all that information, the officer still concluded that the child was safe at that time?
Well, the officer didn't have that information. So this former principal is now disclosing all this information. And I believe in the news clips I've reviewed that he was making calls to DCF and other agencies. Waterbury Police were never notified by this particular principal about those conditions. So this is all information that is coming out now as this case unfolds.
I believe he said he called police, but you have no record of that.
Well, I believe he's wrong if that's what he said, because there is no record of it.
Can you talk about, you said that there was some evidence that corroborates the story of the gentleman. Can you talk any more about what that is, or how do you go about corroborating a story like this that's so extraordinary?
Right. So there's some physical evidence that was seized from the house that does corroborate the fact that that room did have exterior locks on it, and a number of different styles of exterior locks. As was explained during an interview with the victim throughout the years, it appeared that the locks increased in security levels as time progressed, and obviously he became older and maybe a little bit stronger. So that's certainly one component, and then there's other components of the fire investigation that are part of the evidence package as well.
And I'm sorry if you said this, but were these the only two individuals living in that home?
Yes, there were two siblings. They were in and out of the home, but they have since moved out.
So say DCF had all this information the principal's saying, they don't share any of that with police?
You're going to have to talk to DCF about what their protocol is on when they share information with police. DCF does work closely with police departments and provides a lot of information to police departments in a number of different ways. I don't know what their protocol is on when they share that information, so that would be something that they would have to respond to.
Chief, how is the victim doing now? Obviously, some serious conditions. We've read about the PTSD and depression. What can you share about how the victim's faring?
Right. So obviously, he's got a lot of mental health issues that he has to deal with at this point in time. There are a lot of physical conditions that he's working on as well. I mean, here's an adult that was 5'9" and 68 pounds. There's some apparent orthopedic issues. The room was very small. Honestly, when I read about it and talk to the investigators and overlook the interviews, it was worse than the conditions of a jail cell. So there's a lot of physical therapy that he'll have to go through. There's a lot of healing that he'll have to go through mentally. And I can tell you this: our investigators, and I'll specifically point out Detective Steve Brownell and Detective John Pace, who were the lead investigators in this particular case, but all the investigators, the entire Criminal Investigations Bureau, has been very supportive of the victim. They took a collection up and bought him some items to try to make life more comfortable, some clothing and some books and some things to kind of get him along the way as he goes through this process. But, our plan is to continue to support him. He's going to need a lot of support. as he travels through this and tries to figure out how to navigate what has occurred and what the future holds for him.
Chief, I think a lot of people are wondering, like, where are his other relatives? Did no one else see this man for 20 years that they were able to, say anything, report anything to police? Like, was his stepmother the only person in his life? Did he have? You said he had 2 siblings. Where is everyone else? Where are all the relatives?
So the backdrop is being formed, and this is again why the investigation continues. It appears that there was a very controlling situation going on regarding the victim's condition, his whereabouts, his connection with other family members, other people in the community, other friends. Information was very guarded on what was released and when he was able to see other members of the family and other members of the community. And I think that, I know, from information provided in the interviews that there was a level of fear on retaliation on what would occur if information was released or help was provided to the victim by family members.
Were there any injuries as a result of the fire?
Smoke inhalation, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know if there's any long-term effects from what occurred at the fire, but on scene, he was treated for smoke inhalation.
Could he get out of the house? Did he get out of the house on his own, or did firefighters have to rescue him?
He was assisted out of the house.
Will you be identifying him at any point?
That's a great question. Not at this time, and I don't really know when, if at all.
Where's the mother?
The mother has not been involved in the victim's life
From the beginning.
pretty much. From all accounts, around 2 years old.
The suspect is denying all the allegations through her attorney. Has she said anything about how her stepson would be 68 pounds, for example?
Kimberly Sullivan refused to talk to us immediately.
Do you have a picture of the door lock that was taken as evidence?
I'm 100% certain that we do. I'd have to confer with the state's attorney if we were going to release any information like that at this time.
Does Kimberly Sullivan, have any prior criminal convictions?
No prior criminal history with us here at the police department.
Neighbors were telling us that if you had knocked on the window, they would have helped them. Were there any other attempts besides his fire to try to get him some help?
No, again, I don't, from what we've put together so far, no, and that's because of a fear of retaliation. I mean, he, in his room, to relieve himself, right, had this elaborate mechanism that he created where he would urinate in a bottle, and he had straws connected to the bottom of the bottle, and he found a hole in the storm window frame that he was able to put these straws through. And he did that because the storm window itself wouldn't open up, and he was fearful that if he broke that storm window or tried to open it up, that there would be some retaliation. So, I'm certainly not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but there's a lot of nuances to people that are victims and held captive, and I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done with this particular gentleman in that area to really determine all the impact and all the effects that this long-term condition has really brought on him.
I take it you haven't had a case like this before.
33 years of law enforcement. This is the worst treatment of humanity that I've ever witnessed. Right? I mean, honestly, when we first started talking about it, we really couldn't believe it. It took a lot of convincing amongst ourselves to just really accept what was going on, and it's really hard to talk about still. I mean, it's shuddering to think that someone would treat any person, let alone a family member or someone that was entrusted as a guardian or a parental figure in this way.
There, just can you also share your personal thoughts and reaction just knowing something so disturbing happened in this community?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, it's just unfathomable that anyone could treat someone this way, as the chief said, especially within the relationship that they had. It's devastating, and we're going to make sure that the systems are working into the future to see what might have happened 20 years ago when this may have been reported. But at this point, it appears that this was just really an isolated sense, and that they were locked in there all by themselves. And through fear and intimidation, she was able to keep it secret all that time.
So when you're talking about the future and other children and other families out there, I mean, if there's no protection, and the kids are told to lie about being fed, I mean, what happens? Like, are they going to stay in these situations like he did, or?
Well, there's limits, I would think, to what you can do. We can send people out to check and look at it. I don't know what it looked like when the officer walked into the house in 2005, what the child looked like. That's 2 decades ago. And so, it's hard. We can send people out. We could do the checks. We can make sure that teachers, and administrators are looking out for children, notice some of the telltale signs. I think we've come a long way as well in 20 years over looking for these things and being able to report the requirements of what has to go to DCF have changed over that time. So I think we can continue to do it, but can I tell you that it will never happen again? I don't think anyone can tell you that, because there's a lot of things that go into this that, can help keep it secret.
Where was she arrested in Southington?
I don't know. I could get you that information. I'm not sure exactly where she was arrested in Southington. And it's important, to piggyback on the mayor's response to your inquiry. If you see something, say something. I know it's a cliche, and we talk about it all the time, but of all the great work that the media and press is doing now on this particular case, and talking to relatives and neighbors and some school district people. I know some have said that they've made calls, but some have said they haven't, right? So if things are peculiar, it's important to notify the police department. We will certainly look into that information and take the appropriate action. And it may take more than one time, depending on the circumstances we find when we get there. And we know that, through history and through our work with servicing agencies, that victims of domestic violence especially are oftentimes reluctant to come forward. And we encourage people that are victims of domestic violence to find the fortitude to come forward, and we're here to help. We really are.
In this situation, though, it seems like, according to the police report, that his life became worse because someone reported it. And after that second DCF visit, the mother pulled him from school.
Correct.
But you still would encourage people to.
I would. I mean, because you're not going to break the cycle any other way. I mean, unfortunately, in this case, it seems as if an 11-year-old was taken extreme advantage of, and at that time, it's very tragic that occurred. But it will never stop, right? And this gentleman suffered for 2 decades because of that. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but I think it's really important to never lose hope and to continue to report incidents, especially if you're a victim of neglect or a crime.
Was he in the room all the time? Because there were some reports that he was in the backyard doing chores.
He would be released from the room anywhere from 15 minutes to a couple of hours every day. There were some indication during the interview that although his dad didn't do him too many favors when the stepmother wasn't around, he would stay out of the room a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
A news conference there underway on a very.
That's crazy. Now, his teacher, the principal that was at the school at the time before he left the school system, he did an interview, and let me tell you, DCS dropped the ball. They dropped the ball. They called DCS so many times concerning this child, it was ridiculous, and nothing was done. And to prevent them from continuously calling DCS. The stepmother just pulled him out of school altogether after like about the fourth grade. So that's when he came completely, not getting anything. At least when he was going to school, he was getting something to eat and drink. But once she pulled him completely out of school, he wasn't getting anything whatsoever. So check out this interview from the principal, what he had to say.
It was my first year as principal of Barnard Elementary School. And I just remember seeing this kid. He was just so tiny, much smaller than usual 5-year-olds, maybe a quarter of the size. I mean, it's absolutely tiny, and he had no color to his face, and he looked emaciated. He looked like he wasn't eating at all. And as time went on, and again, you're a new principal, so you're kind of getting the ropes of school. I would walk in the morning. Now, Barnard was an old elementary school built in 1898. It's used for adult ed now. And they had, the kids would come in the morning, and there was an old bathroom, boys' room downstairs, and they had the old type ceramic urinals, which were probably about 4 feet high, bigger than him. And I would walk in there in the morning, and he would be flushing the toilet, drinking the water coming out of the urinal as it's raining. I'm going, oh man, there's something wrong with this. And he would tell me he's thirsty. Then I'm thinking, well, maybe he's thirsty. He can't reach the fountain because the water fountain was too high. I don't know if I called the mother at that particular day, but then I would find him in the bathroom almost every morning, opening up his little lunch. He had a plastic lunchbox that kids use, and it was filthy, disgusting, with just old food and crust and everything else on it. And he would open it up. This is 8 o'clock in the morning, and he starts shoving all his lunch into his mouth. What the heck are you doing? Oh, I'm hungry. I said, didn't you have breakfast? No. What's going on here? And at this point, I would call his mother, and I'd say, the kid's hungry. He's eating his food in the bathroom, this and that. Didn't get anywhere. He stopped doing that, okay? And the year progresses, the teachers are all concerned. His kindergarten teachers, what's going on? He's always hungry, blah, blah, blah. As he gets into first grade, the next year, when you go to lunch, we're getting reports from other kids that he's stealing their lunch. He's literally taking it while they're eating and eating their lunch. Now you're talking 6-year-olds now. Kids do stuff like that. So it's not that uncommon, but he was doing it constantly. So again, like Mr. Principal, I called the mother just to kind of say, hey, what's going on, this and that. Oh, I'll take care of it. No, this, that. He's eating. There should be no problem. And looking back, he probably got punished when he went home. So what I did was probably the worst possible thing for the kid. He wouldn't be stealing the food as much, but he was constantly hungry. These teachers, he had the teachers up to 4th grade. They were constantly bringing food in for the kid. And he was just ravenous, devouring it all the time. He'd tell us stories of, he had 2 biological sisters to the mother. And the mother would order pizza, and he wouldn't get any of the pizza. And this kind of stuff kind of broke your heart. And over the years, from kindergarten to 4th grade, between myself, the school nurse, the parent liaison, the teachers, called DCF numerous times. If I'm saying 20, that's probably being conservative. And whether they investigate, you do the paperwork, you do the phone call, they do the investigation, they come back, we went to the house and nothing, this and that. You really weren't getting anywhere going through that agency. After 4th grade, he never went to 5th grade. And I'm not quite sure if he finished his 4th grade at Barnard School, but I definitely know he didn't show up for 5th grade. It was a small neighborhood school. It was maybe 250 kids. All the kids, the neighborhood, this and that. And so I would start asking the kids, hey, you see this and that? And I knew the kids who lived right next door. And I would ask them, and they would tell me, oh, yeah, we see him. He's in the window of the house waving out the window. I said, well, does he ever come out and play? Do you ever see him in the yard? No, we never see him in the yard. He never plays. He never comes out. I said, well, how long is he in the window for? Well, he's in the window for a little while, and then we see him the next day or the next day. So obviously, I'm kind of concerned about that. I called the police at least 2 or 3 times, could be more, for wellness checks. And I gave statements in terms of there's something wrong. this kid, he's not coming to school. There's no reports of him going to school. Kids see him in the window. What's going on? I don't remember the police literally ever coming to the school to follow up on it, but I remember them saying, yeah, they went to the house, they saw the kid, they talked to the mother, everything's fine. And I would respond by saying, how is everything fine? He's not going to school. I mean, I specifically remember the police telling me, well, the mother said she's enrolling him in Wolcott schools. And I remember actually contacting Wolcott schools. There's only 2 elementary schools there, explaining who I was. We're looking for this kid. What our concerns was, there was no record of him going to Wolcott school. The 2 sisters went to, I want to say, St. Margaret's School, which is up off Highland Avenue, somewhere up there. I don't know if it's still in business, whatever. The 2 sisters, the twin sisters, went there. So we never had any communication with the 2 sisters, but they obviously went to a private parochial school, which was a pretty nice school in Waterbury, and he was at the public school. So we basically, after 4th grade, we lost the contact, other than me calling. And I think myself with the parent liaison claims we went to the house when he was in 5th grade. It's more than likely we did. And I don't think anybody ever answered the door. I remember walking around the house looking. And even farther past, that had to be 2004, 2005. And after that, I was telling you about the after-school programs I do. Yeah. One of the programs at the time I was doing was at Chase Park House, which is on right on the street, the main street going on Sunnyside Avenue. And we'd finish the programs at Chase Park House, and I would just drive across the street, and I would look to see if I could see. I said, that's the house. I would tell my wife the story. I said, that's where he lived. I don't know where this kid is, but I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to see the story on Dateline sometime, without question. And that was not just my thought. It was everyone in the school who had any kind of contact with the school at all. It was inevitable that this kid, you can't just drop a 10-year-old off the face of the earth and he never shows up again. And it's like, no one cared. No one cared enough to really follow up on it, other than me or somebody going up there and busting the door and pulling the kid out by his ear and saying, what the heck's going on here? Which I came to the point of wanting to do that sometimes and didn't, obviously. But everyone really was concerned with this child since he was 5 years old. You knew something was wrong. It was grossly wrong.
How does that work that the school is saying this child isn't in school? How is it possible that, like, he was never accounted for? It's just, that blows my mind.
I think it blows everybody's mind. And whether it was the police who went to the house, and I noticed on the article that it did mention the last report, there were 2 reports of wellness checks in 2004, 2005. They had to be the ones I made, because that's when we left the school from 4th grade to 5th grade. He never showed up. And I knew something was amiss when he didn't show up at the other schools or the parochial school that the sisters were at. And it kind of fell off the face of the earth. That was it. I mean, you kind of go on with your life, okay, maybe I'm missing something, maybe he moved, maybe he went with another. That was an excuse the mother did use once. He was moving with a relative, whether it was Wolcott or someone else, Florida. I kind of remember a story like that, never verified. So that's where it ended up. Until today, when I'm working in the after-school program in Waterbury, and my phone starts blowing up with messages like, what's going on? I never pick up my phone. I just happen to pick it up. And it's all these teachers contacting me saying, do you believe this? We all knew this was going to happen. So prior to you coming, we've been calling on the phone, talking to this one, talking to that one, and saying, oh yeah, we knew this was happening. This is not a surprise to anybody. Everybody knew one day that either the kid was going to show up dead, or he was going to show up in a situation like the kids out in California that 8 children live in locked up in the house. We've read these stories before. It was something crazy like that.
And learning that allegedly he set fire to his own home to escape the situation he was in. I mean, what do you make of that, knowing the child yourself? I mean, not a child now, but having known.
I'm actually proud of him that he had the gumption to do. He was willing to die to get out of that situation. And the same feeling myself and everybody that was involved with him in the school were sick, because it had to come to that. because what else could we collectively as a school community do to kind of cry out to say, this kid needs help. Somebody needs to go in there and find this kid and do something. And that's the extreme. He's now a man. He's a man. He's 67 pounds, according to the thing, still starving to death. For how many years for somebody to live like that when you know that that was going on and you couldn't do anything about it?
That many years ago. And as someone, to what it seems like one of the only people that, if you were the last wellness check, one of the only and last people that seems to have tried to make that connection and reach out. Is there anything you want him to know? Anything you want to say?
I hope he remembers us. I mean, it was a long time ago, but I hope the student remembers the staff at Barnard School and how much they really loved him and tried to help him the much they can. And sorry, we couldn't do more because you went through more than any of us ever will go through in our lives. And I'm glad you're out of there and getting hopefully the help that you need, that you deserve. He was a good kid. The kid really never caused any other than taking people's food, but there was a reason for that. He was really a good kid. He wasn't a malicious kid. He wasn't a troublemaker. He remembers a decent student, considering everything he went through.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, just such a profound story. And it's really crazy to me just hearing this, how many attempts to law enforcement and the state you folks made. I mean, you're the principal of the school. Who knows better than you that this kid is not showing up? I mean, that feels like it's a frustrating thing to even, like, I can't even comprehend how you felt. Like, are you, I'm not making this up. So we were just talking about, I mean, it's kind of insane that just to hear, like, what were you sort of feeling as an administrator? You know, you have responsibility to make these calls. You're making these calls. You went to the house. I mean, were you kind of like, what else can I do?
Right. Well, I want to make a point that it wasn't just me. It was the school nurse over and over again, making calls to the mother, trying to get doctors involved with it, because we knew this kid was not healthy, not getting anywhere. It was the parent liaison. It was the teachers. I can remember almost every teacher from kindergarten, first, second, third grade being in my office with me calling DCF together. So, and it wasn't just once a year. It was numerous times a year. And even after he left the school, we were still calling. We were still concerned about it, which brings me to the point was by the time he was going to fifth grade, it was probably around 2005, 2006. The laws are different in school attendance. You could just simply withdraw your child from school and you didn't even have to make a plan for homeschooling. It was a very lax system. And a lot of parents would just say, oh, I'm homeschooling them. And that was it. And at one point, the parents had to provide a portfolio to the principal. Here's what they're doing. Very few ever did it. And it was never mandated in terms of, they never pressed the case on it. Where is it? So, you know.
Maybe if it was today,
yeah,
this was a 6-year-old, this wouldn't be able to happen. Is that kind of the thinking?
If DCF's involved, anything's possible. And I'm giving this experience with this young student, but in my 35 years, 14 as an administrator, DCF dropped the ball 99% of the time. It's just the reality of the agency. I know every year they say they're changing, they're going to make corrections. I don't believe it. It's just.
Now at 11, an NBC Connecticut exclusive. We're learning much more about the horror that took place inside this Waterbury home.
It never felt right. Even as a kid, it never felt right.
A former neighbor shares his experience with the victim when they were kids.
I saw him, he waved, like, you know, he was on the backyard for maybe 2 seconds.
And the justice he hopes will now come decades later.
When you live so close to someone, you don't know what's happening behind doors.
That neighbor not only lived next door to that victim 20 years ago, they went to the same school at the same time. Thanks for joining us for the news at 11. I'm Mike Heideck.
And I'm Keisha Grant. It's a story you'll see on just one station. Tonight, that man is sharing what he saw as his neighbor was allegedly being held captive just steps away from him. NBC Connecticut's Melissa Cooney joining us live in front of that home on Blake Street. Melissa, what else did he have to say?
That's right. This is the Sullivan home. That's really the focal point of the story. And just right next door, this is the home where Peter Lopes says he and his family lived from 2003 to 2009. Now, some of those years would end up being highlighted in Kimberly Sullivan's case. That's because they were some of the final years that her stepson was enrolled in school.
Not one soul forgot about you.
Peter Lopes says since he and his family moved out of their Blake Street home in 2009, he always wondered what happened to the boy that lived next door.
It never felt right. Even as a kid, it never felt right.
Police charged Kimberly Sullivan with kidnapping, assaulting, and for allegedly restraining her stepson for decades until now, at age 32. When Lopes and his family lived next door in the early 2000s, he says the stepson was never outside and never around other people. He says he would often see him peer through a window.
In hindsight, when I was 9, these are little things that you're noticing, but as, a 30-year-old now, I'm looking at it and it's just, there were so many signs.
Lopes and his siblings attended the Barnard School at the same time as the boy. He says he remembers teachers and Principal Tom Pannone asking about the boy and calling home to see if they had seen him, especially when he never showed up to 5th grade. The arrest warrant alleges the Department of Children and Families visited the home twice in 2004 and 2005 due to school complaints. And Principal Pannone told us the school reached out to multiple parties for multiple years out of concern.
All the support that he was getting, it was just getting nowhere because someone was just playing a much better game.
The victim's stepmother posted bond and is out under intense supervision, but she can essentially roam free. Now she is back in court on March 26th. We're live in Waterbury. Melissa Cooney, NBC Connecticut News. Keisha.
Unspeakable abuse uncovered in a quiet neighborhood. A man allegedly locked away in a home, starving and alone for decades.
If he would have just banged on the window or something, we could have helped him.
Tonight, questions mount over how the victim slipped through the cracks in the system.
To figure out what happened, why it happened, and to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Tonight, looking for answers after a man says he was held captive by his stepmother for more than 20 years. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Mark Zinni. This is a case that's making national headlines right now after the 32-year-old victim was rescued. But there are a lot of questions about how all of this happened. Your reporter Bryant Reed is live in Waterbury with more on the next phase of this investigation tonight. Bryant.
Mark, the woman arrested in this horrific case is free on bond tonight. However, you'll notice that she hasn't returned to her home here on Blake Street. And if you get a closer look in the windows, you'll notice that they're still boarded up after police say the victim set his room on fire in order to be rescued. Now, tonight, a lawmaker told me what needs to be done moving forward so this never happens again.
The young man's unimaginable suffering over the course of 2 decades is just a reminder of the darkness that does exist in our world.
Arraigned and handcuffed, but released on bail, Kimberly Sullivan afforded a freedom she allegedly never allowed her stepson, which, according to police, is what led him to setting a fire to escape the home.
Information was very guarded on what was released and when he was able to see other members of the family and other members of the community.
Waterbury Police Chief Fernando Spagnolo diving into the investigation with plenty of questions still to be answered, despite allegations from the victim saying he was forced to drink toilet water and lived on the verge of starvation. There were also concerns and complaints 20 years ago from the victim's school and friends, not only because the victim was pulled out of elementary school by his stepmother, but he was also showing up to school hungry, forced to ask for others' food or eat scraps from the garbage. The victim says DCF made 2 visits back in 2005, once for a welfare check, another because the family wanted to file charges against the school for harassment. According to DCF, none of the abuse and neglect claims were substantiated, so they got rid of the paperwork after 5 years, per state policy. Republican Senator Jason Perillo is the ranking senator on the Children's Committee, which oversees DCF policies in the legislature, and says a thorough investigation needs to be done.
Understand what the schools did, what they knew, what they shared. If there are folks at DCF who are involved in this, who still work there, those folks have to be talked to. Quite honestly, if there are folks involved who don't work there, DCF has an obligation to pursue them and figure out what was done or what could have been done differently.
Kimberly Sullivan's lawyer says any and all allegations they vehemently deny.
Absolutely shocked. Okay, absolutely appalled by these allegations. Absolutely shocked.
Now, Sullivan, although out on bond, still does have to report to a probation officer. Now, in the meantime, neither Sullivan nor her lawyer have explained exactly how her stepson got into the condition that he was found in. Meanwhile, Sullivan will return to court on March 26. Your reporter in Waterbury tonight, Brian Reed, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
Wow. So yeah, I don't know why she acting surprised about the whole issue. I mean, it's obviously that the child was starved. So yeah, guys, share your thoughts with me. Comment below what you think about this story. Let's chat about it.